My first near-death experience was at age 45 in 1995. I suffered a massive heart attack and subsequently had a triple bypass. After the operation, I had a distinct memory of moving to another dimension or place, if you will. For several months I thought this memory was caused by the drugs, but after time I came to believe it was something else. I drifted or floated to a place of such calm it is impossible to gauge. There was a blue sky, as blue as I have ever seen. Sometimes today I will look at a blue sky and get a feeling of calmness. I saw tall grass gently blowing in the wind over rolling hills, but there was no feeling of a breeze, nor was there any sound. It was so quiet. I was not walking but seemed to be floating over the fields very slowly. This place was filled with warmth, calmness and an unexplainable feeling of fulfillment and being one with the universe. As I was drifting over the hills so very slowly and absorbing this feeling of greatest warmth, I saw frames of my children flashing across the horizon. They were not still pictures but pictures of them looking at me, very worried. They were wanting me to come back to be with them. They needed me and they did not say anything. I could hear them without seeing their lips moving. I knew I had to make a choice right then. If I didn't, I would not be going back. To go on, I would be encompassed by this calmness and warmth forever. It would have been nice to go on. To go back, I would be going to a place of hurt and pain. It would be filled with pain and responsibility. The hurt of emotions, the stress of life. I decided to go back because my children needed more help in directing their futures. Their future depended on me to be there. It was just not time yet. The children are just not ready to go on by themselves. Instantly I was back. I saw no bright light or angels or the feeling of a religious entity. My second near-death experience happened in 1997. I was involved in a serious car crash with many major injuries. When I was trapped in the car, I felt no pain even though I had my pelvis broken in 2 places, a fractured tailbone, a rib that had punctured my lung, a fractured skull and lacerations to my face, and part of my ear was severed. I had many flashbacks of the accident for months after, but I had a positive and complete memory of the near-death experience when I became conscious enough to talk and stay awake without passing out several days later. I started talking about my experience to my son first, then to others as I became more comfortable talking about it. Again, I tried to evaluate whether this was from the drugs or was it just the signals that your mind gets as your body shuts down. I saw again, a place of warmth, love and friendship. It was something like a tunnel but not round. It was a walkway type tunnel that you see joining buildings or stores together. The type that goes over a street. Not narrow but wide. I walked along it, or it felt like I was walking, but I don't remember my feet moving. It was not bright on each side of the walkway, but it was not dark either. When I reached the end of the tunnel, I could see people. It appeared to be only from their waist up. It was not scary at all. Everyone was smiling and happy. I saw faces that I recognized. I saw 2 grandfathers and my father. It was very dark behind their bodies and I felt the presence of multitudes of others behind them. Someone was shaking my hand as to greet me. I think it was my father. He died of Alzheimer's disease and was a mess when he died. But now he was upright and looking healthy, and I realized just how short he really was. All these people were so very happy to see me. At that point I felt the need to go back to the living. It was not a horrifying feeling but just a point where it was time to decide. I still don't think the decision to go back was mine. I feel someone decided it for me. My hand was still holding, not shaking anymore in greetings, the person who I first started shaking hands with. The hand was very warm and soothing. My hand slowly and gently slipped away as I floated backwards to the living world. The hand was not holding me at all but had a very gentle grip. Then it was over. I was back. Somewhere during this whole experience or whatever it was, I remember a brown door with an old-fashioned porcelain doorknob on it surrounded by a black background. I knew that on the other side of the door was a religious phenomenon, very bright light and probably God himself. This door is always there and is available to everyone. I can go through it any time I wish. I have a feeling that my hand was on the doorknob and I could have gone through any time I wanted. In retrospect, I am not afraid of dying now. One distinct feeling I have is there are people who went to the other side against their will and I feel so very sorry for them. They are happy there because they have adjusted but would rather have spent more time in the real world to stay with loved ones. I used to be religious, but am not a religious person today. Although I have now a great respect for deeply religious people. I had an insight to something very few people get to see and I am happy to have experienced it. I enjoy telling people about it. The 3rd of May, 1969. It was toward the end of the dry season, and my platoon was pulling out. Our mission was simple: drive down the road, show the flag, and make sure that we still had the right of way. The two slowly moving tracks, armored personnel carriers, in front of mine were already kicking up the pulverized dirt road into little clouds of dust. Lady, the platoon mascot, trotted alongside wagging her tail. She no longer went with us ever since a mine had blown up the track that she had been riding on. I exchanged my cloth hat for a helmet, put on my wire-rimmed sunglasses, and half-cocked the .50 caliber machine gun as we passed through the base camp gate and picked up speed. Lady stopped a few feet beyond the gate and watched us go. Our four tracks soon achieved a monotonous but comfortable 40 miles per hour, which created a welcome breeze. To either side of the road for mile after mile lay a grid work of rice paddy dikes dividing the land into tidy rectangles of various sizes. The pale yellow stubble of last season's crop failed to hide the earth in the fields. Separated by cracks an inch wide, the clay soil of the paddies had dried into flagstone-sized blocks. Although the land was flat, the fields did not extend far into the distance, but rather ended abruptly at the ubiquitous wood line. This woods was composed of thick, lush, green palm trees and stood from 20 to 30 feet tall. From no place in the Mekong River Delta could one escape from being completely surrounded by it. Sometimes it might be a couple of miles away, and at others only a few hundred feet. It grew where the delta distributaries were, and they, like a root system, were everywhere. We controlled the larger towns and villages, the roads, the skies, the major waterways, and the rice paddies. The wood line belonged to Charlie. With diesel engines roaring and trailing a huge, mile-long cloud of dust, the column began to approach one of the spots where the dreaded jungle wall squeezed in on the road from both sides. Instinctively, I began to watch the wood line more closely. All of a sudden, a very large anti-tank mine was command-detonated 8 feet directly beneath me. I immediately knew what was happening, and thought to myself, oh shit, here we go again. I was catapulted upwards along with everyone and everything else. People, dust, weapons, ammunition, helmets, and C-ration boxes formed an expanding inverted cone with myself in the middle. On the journey upward, external time decelerated. The rates of the rotations of all of the objects surrounding me rapidly decreased in an apparent violation of the law of conservation of angular momentum. I was fascinated by the unnatural ever-slowing gyrations of the bodies of my comrades and wondered, is this the end? Are we all dead? At the apex of my trajectory, time stopped completely and an inexplicable calm descended. The state of consciousness that then prevailed was as to the normal waking state as the normal waking state is to a dream. Whatever it was peaceful, omnipresent, omniscient, and absorbed everything into an indivisible whole. The entire universe past, present, and future collapsed down to a single center upon which everything depends for its existence. It is that which does not change. It is the light of pure consciousness which illuminates all things. It is the ultimate meaning of the enigmatic biblical passage, the light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. Matthew 6:22. It is the great nothing, for it includes all things, and therefore, is itself not a thing. That's how it gets to be the all in all. Furthermore, there was, and still is, absolutely no doubt as to its authenticity any more than one would doubt upon awakening from a dream that the waking state is real and that the dream was just a dream. In short, God himself took over my reins in the sense that I no longer existed as a distinct entity, only he exists. There was an overwhelming feeling of bliss, love, compassion, and strangely enough a sense of déjà vu. The knowledge obtained that the true home and the true self of all things had been miraculously revealed. The events of my life up to that point were unhurriedly and non-judgmentally reviewed in great detail, not in chronological order, but somehow all at once, although some events were emphasized more intensely than others. Subsequently, I was allowed to exist again. There was no choice in the matter, it simply happened, and was given the opportunity to be aware of anything that I wanted to be aware of, with the understanding that time was not a factor. Indeed, there was all the time in the world. I proceeded to focus on this or that aspect of my life and concluded that there wasn't too much to be ashamed of. Actually, I made extremely poor use of this gift, but then, I was just a naive 22-year-old with a somewhat skewed concept of relative importance. I could see a 360-degree panorama of the road, the wood lines on either side, and the other 3 tracks of my platoon, 2 in front and 1 behind us. The entire episode seemed to be housed in my head, but I was uncertain whether or not my head was still attached to the rest of my body, although, under the circumstances, this point did not seem important one way or the other. In other words, I really didn't care if my life was to be snuffed out or not within the next few seconds. I was then gently, but unequivocally, informed that I would survive the explosion without serious injury and even that I would make it out of Vietnam in one piece. So, selfishly, I turned my attention to the immediate situation and very calmly and deliberately concluded that I should 1. Stay conscious so as not to drown in 2 inches of rice paddy water. 2. Stay loose so as to break as few bones as possible. And 3. Roll away from the track so that it wouldn't crush me to death if it tipped over. Only after my mind had run out of things to decide on did time start to rush back in. The transcendental state of consciousness terminated and I reverted back to the normal waking state. I could see the ground about 20 feet below me and began to fall towards it. I was left with an intense feeling of awe and well-being. Ever since, I have been convinced with a conviction that precedes even my conviction that 2 + 2 = 4. That God is for me. It is no longer a matter of faith or belief, but rather, one of knowing for sure because I have seen him as he is. However, it was a pleasant surprise to discover that he is loving, compassionate, and forgiving properties which I had not previously made adequate allowances for. I will always be thankful to him for reaching down and picking me up in the palm of his hand, so to speak, at that particular instant. In fact, it still brings tears of gratitude to my eyes even as I write this 30 years later. Also, I no longer fear death, pain and suffering, yes, but not death itself, because, by his grace, this particular raindrop remembers the ocean from which it comes. Unfortunately, the experience of this state is up to God, not down to us, but take my word for it, it is always here and now and a lot closer than you think. I have never experienced anything, before or since, which came anywhere near close to being as real and as profound as the state of consciousness which I have feebly attempted to describe. However, my remembrance of it has sufficed to console and comfort me through the vicissitudes of life, especially through the hard times. Sorry, I have not noticed any paranormal or psychic or supernatural abilities with respect to myself, just an unshakable conviction in the reality of something spiritual. If you ever run across a surefire method for reawakening this state within me, without blowing me up or telling me to meditate on OM for 30 years, please let know. May God go with you, he will anyway, but it's a nice thought.